Step into realms where the heart takes flight, where strategy meets the edge of night. The Dungeons, Dragons, and Psychology Podcast. Prepare your mind. Now be our guest.
Hello, cyclothids, and welcome to the Dungeons, Dragons, and Psychology Podcast. I'm your host, Robert Walker, and on today's session, I am joined by Logan Hanley of the Red Hare Inn. Logan, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here and talk some D&D.
You've got, with the Red Hare Inn, you've got quite a bit of projects that are associated with that. You've got the Ecriom expeditions, Tales from the Red Hare Inn, the Red Hare Missive. Can you tell me a little bit about what the Red Hare Inn is and about your actual play homebrew campaign that you do?
So like you said, I run the Red Hare Inn. I like to call myself the Innkeeper. But the Red Hare Inn started a long time ago, back with my foundations of D&D. It was one of the first homebrew pieces that I put into my world of Ecriom. So when I was reflecting on how I really wanted to build and grow my community, I was like, well, where should I start? And it always fell back to like the Red Hare Inn was my beginning in D&D and kind of role playing. So it just felt very natural to fall back into that space and very comfortable. It's since grown into what it is now, the Ecriom expedition being kind of our flagship campaign, as I'd like to call it. It's really just my game that I play with my friends. It's very much a home game. It's the game that I fall back to, and for that kind of like energy and positive vibes throughout the week, and the energy that I much so need. But it's a story that we're all telling that's very near and dear to our hearts. And very much a project of friendship and love. Expanding upon that, Tales from the Red Hare Inn is my opportunity to collaborate with others to get their perspectives and bring in their unique styles of DMing and role-playing and storytelling to the table. Collaborating very similarly to how Matt Mercer is doing with Abria, and now with Brendan Lee Mulligan to do the Exandria Unlimited series, where it's just a chance for us to really build out the lands of Ecriom in a way that I would have never imagined and thought possible. Whether it's same time periods, looking back at prehistory is very similar to how Brendan was doing, or even in some cases looking at some of our players' backstories or things that they've talked about in the Ecriom expeditions proper, through the lens of the DM player.
Nice. So the Ecriom expeditions, I think you guys have published like 16 episodes of that now.
On YouTube and podcasts, I think we're at like 16, 17. Yeah. I need to be more. That's one of the things I struggle with, is being consistent with making sure those are up to date. On Twitch, we're up to episode 21, I think, was our last session this past Tuesday.
So how long prior to starting the actual play podcast have you been playing in this homebrew world of Ecriom?
Ecriom has been around since 2016. So I started DMing and running games shortly after learning what D&D was and like how to play. I'd been playing in a Lost Mines of Phandelver game over Roll20 one summer. Kind of just stumbled into it with an old Xbox buddy of mine as a way to stay connected while I was away visiting my girlfriend, now wife. And so we played a couple sessions. The group, because it was Roll20 and none of us really knew each other, just kind of fell apart after the first couple sessions. It wasn't very consistent. And then when I got home for the summer, I was like, hey, Brendan, my brother, hey, Brendan, I got this new game that I found. It's really cool. It's called Dungeons and Dragons. And like, we'd heard of D&D before. My dad had talked about it a couple of times and how he had played, but we had never really delved into what it was. And so I'm like, I already got all the books. I already know how to build characters. We're good. I'm going to run a game. You don't have a choice. You're my
That is
little
how it
brother.
goes
We're both,
sometimes.
it was like, you're my little brother. We both live at home. So like, this is right after I got out of college, and I was like, we both live at home. We're going to play D&D. And so we ran across the street. We grabbed our other neighbor who was a year younger than my brother. And was like, you're going to play. You don't have a choice. You're a nerd like us. We're going to do this thing. And so started a Lost Mines of Phandelver game. And while I was running Lost Mines, I was on the backside of things, starting to create my own world, create Ecriom. Because I had felt very passionately, I guess the word would be, about writing my own thing and like making it my own rather than following a module at the time.
Yeah.
It was just that idea of like, this is mine. I get to kind of build and create how I want to. And I was very much already getting into I'm a improvisation based DM.
Sure.
And so the modules just weren't really my cup of tea at the time.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, just kind of fell naturally into it. Fast forward to today, where I ran my brother and them through it for a bit. And then when I moved out to Philadelphia, where I'm currently located, I had a group of players who we ran a campaign in the lands of Ecriom until they unfortunately TPK'd against the Shadow. Listen, Shadow Dragon high level was just, they prioritized a couple things where they shouldn't have, and it cost them. But yeah, so they ran them through that. And then finally got to the point where I was ready to bring it to kind of the live streaming, and podcasts, YouTube arena. And so I had dipped my toes in right at the start of the pandemic to streaming, and had met some really cool people and some awesome friends, and was like, hey, do you want to go on this adventure with me in my world? And they were all like, hell yeah. And so that's how it got started. And it's slowly growing into me stepping back going, hey, if people want to come into the world and run, a one shot or a mini series, then cool, let's do it. Let's figure out where what you want to do, the story you want to tell fits, and let's collaborate and world build that together.
So with you stepping back a little bit, now, are you getting the opportunity to play in your world at all, or is it still mostly you're DMing when you're involved?
So that's a good question. So part of what I'm doing, initially the first couple of tales from the Red Hare Inn, the very, very first one was one where a friend of mine who I started streaming with, we haven't had an opportunity to play. So we're like, hey, how do we make this work? We make her partner DM the game so that way we can play together. So it was very much, I had the opportunity to play. Since then, I've DM'd one tale from the Red Hare Inn and played in another one. But moving forward, I am very much going to be in the space of like, unless it's very, very personally requested, or there's some reason that I absolutely need to be a player or run it. I will be kind of on the backside running tech and doing the behind the screen things to really, really allow, the way I like to put it is, I'm the innkeeper of the Red Hare Inn. I run, as is. I'm currently the only one who's running stuff for the channel and for, the page and the Discord and all that. You don't need to see my face everywhere. I really, really want to highlight. I really, really want to highlight the stories and the experiences that are being told at the table. And sometimes I feel like me being there isn't necessarily the best way to tell that story. It doesn't feel as authentic for me to be in every piece of Ecriom, every piece of Ecriom that is being told, if that makes sense.
So how does it feel as you sit back and you observe and you listen to this world that you created and all these things that originally sprung forth from your mind, but now they're sort of taking on a life of their own? What is that experience like for you?
It's different. When you have built a world and like, the lore that you want to tell, and you hand that over to another DM to really have that experience of being able to tell a story within it, you can be surprised at what they come up with. And then you could be surprised with how like even something very, very minuscule can affect your entire perception of the world that you've crafted. I like, for example, in the very, very first one, we ventured into this kobold den where we found this red dragon, or the remains of this red dragon that was then turned into a Draco Lich of sorts. I don't quite remember exactly what it was, but it was basically an undead dragon. We ended up fighting it, and we learned that one of the world organizations had been corrupted to the point where they thought that bringing a red dragon back to life was a good thing. And so that not only led us to go, oh, hey, well, who do we go to for that? We go to the Conclave of Worms, which is this conglomerate of both metallic and chromatic and gem dragons all living kind of in harmony. Because it's not Ecriom isn't like traditional D&D where good dragons are good and evil. Like the metallics are good and the chromatics are evil. I played it very much so that the giants and the real big kind of like are against each other are the giants and the dragons.
Okay.
And the dragons were all created under this umbrella of Bahamut and Tiamat back in the origins of the world.
Awesome.
And from there, they all kind of have a similar ideology of like, we're here to foster and grow the humanoid races, right? We want them to succeed. So in order to do that, we all have to be aligned. Now, that doesn't mean there aren't bad dragons and there aren't evil dragons and, the dragons that go around and pillaging and such. There definitely are. Just the ones that want a kind of greater world order, I guess. Sounds really new world order. I don't like how that sounded, but kind of create this organization where the dragons have a little bit more prominence and aren't just seen as good or evil. They're the ones that kind of keep those other dragons in balance and in check, or adventurers as well. So it's definitely one of those things where it's like, back to the original question. Sorry, I've got way off topic.
No, you're good.
But back to the original question, it's weird to kind of step back, but then I'm also sitting here with a notebook going, ooh, hanging on every single word of the story being told, because everything that the DM gives me, everything that the player gives me is now canon in the world.
Yeah.
And is now something that I can play with as a DM myself when I'm world building and I'm experiencing stuff within Ecriom with my players in the Ecriom expeditions.
So that's an interesting point. We had done an episode recently on making your stories canon. And I think one of the things that my guest on the show at the time brought up was that because she played in games where I've done so much stuff, she always worried about whether she'd ever be able to run in that world just for like fear of upsetting what I had created or things like that. But I never really see it like that. Like I think they're all, collaborative storytelling means we all get to tell part of the story. So,
100%.
Yeah, I think that's just an interesting thing but where you're at, where you're just like totally giving up the reins and being like, here is the world, show me what you can create in it. I think that's really awesome.
There's a beauty, I think, to being able to be flexible with the lore a little bit. Like I have a lot of things that I know that I want to be canon, and then I have things that I can be flexible with the canon on, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. So can you share any favorite moments that you've had either from running your games or from observing your games in this world? Anything that really stands out to you as like either an epic moment or just something that you're really proud of?
We'll be right back.
Hey, Cyclithids, if you love the Dungeons, Dragons, and Psychology podcast and want to help keep it alive, there are a ton of ways you can support the show. Join us on Patreon for exclusive content like NPC character sheets, early access to new products, and even first looks at DM's Assistant app. You can also grab gaming-inspired merch on the Etsy shop, Games for Games, or pick up one of my books, The Player's Handbook to Real Life, or Session Zero, the DMG to Writing Great Campaigns in any system. And even if financial support isn't in the cards for you, you can still help by sharing the show, leaving reviews, or introducing new players to our community. Links are always in the show notes, and thank you for being the heart of our adventure.
Thinking off the top of my head. Well, within Ecriom expeditions, one of the first boss battles that they fought this ooze wizard, and I really liked it because leading up until that point, they had some combats, but the combats were mostly in their favor.
Hmm.
And this was one where they stepped in and they knew it was going to be a hard fight, but then the fight kept going, and they were like, "Oh, this is bad," and felt like they were really up against the ropes, and used everything within their powers to eventually overcome this obstacle. But I just found it particularly funny because the wizard in the party, and particularly memorable because the wizard in the party, every single spell that the wizard cast either didn't hit or was saved against. And so I think the only ones that hit were his magic missiles, and that was it. Like he used magic missiles twice and they both hit. But I mean, other than that, like everything. So you watch him like absolutely like taken out of the game, right? Like by no reason other than the dice are telling the story. And the rest of the party going, "Oh snap, like we need to overcome this somehow," and eventually being able to do so. I run a very RP heavy game, so there are a lot of little RP moments. Our halfling bard made a deal with an archfey to secure the cure for a like an oopla. So oopliks are a kind of were plaguing the town in the beginning that they were in. And so they needed to create some sort of like antitoxin to let people drink and then kick out the oobliks. And they needed a very particular plant. They went into this forest, ended up turning into a little like fey pocket dimension, and had to make a deal with an archfey in order to get what they needed, which is also really fun to run.
That is cool. That sounds exciting. So our main topic today is on adventure writing, and really what we're talking about is not necessarily writing an entire campaign, but just a small piece of a campaign, an adventure that can be, you know, a one shot or several sessions long. But some of the ways that DMs go about writing adventures for their players. And for me, I kind of write an adventure in like the micro scale of the way I write a campaign. I like to think of what is the end goal first is sort of how I always approach it. Where is it that I'm wanting them to get, or who is it that I'm wanting them to face, or what is the big piece of information that they're going to garner at the end of this that's going to help them along the process of their campaign. So I kind of build backwards. First is my preferred method, and then I sort of try and find plot hooks that are irresistible, that are going to lead them along these steps of the way. That's just sort of my normal process. Can you tell me a little bit about how you go about writing adventures?
Yeah, so very similarly, I come from an education background. And so for me, when I plan a lesson, very similarly to planning an adventure, I always think of like, what's my main goal? What's the objective? What do I want them to accomplish? Whether it's defeating a big bad, like you said, or whether it's, looking at it from the lens of like, do they need to grab something? Is it a lore element that they need to go looking for? What is that end goal? And then from there, I kind of work backwards. Some of the arcs, because I tend to be a more improv based DM. Sometimes it's very much I say something that sparks them going down a certain way.
Oh, yeah.
And so I find myself in that weird in between of like, I know where the end goal is for a lot of my plots and a lot of the, side quests and little things that I do. But sometimes players get really caught up on that one thing you said that wasn't meant to be a side adventure or side quest or a plot hook, and next thing you know they're jumping down that rabbit hole, and you got to kind of work as you go. So I've worked at it from both angles, but when I'm actually sitting and actively writing my campaign or taking notes for my campaign, it's very much the prior of starting from the back and working forward.
So you bring up an interesting point where you're talking about players grabbing onto something that maybe you hadn't intended, but I have found that if you're open to changing whatever idea you originally had, sometimes the speculation that happens around the table on the part of your players ends up having some way cooler ideas in it than you had originally written. I know I've been sitting there thinking, and they're just, talking about, oh, what if he did this? That would be so devious. And then I'm like, that would be really devious. And I really love that.
Yeah, just this past Tuesday, that actually something very, very similar happened. So our druid in the party is a homebrew subclass that myself and my friends over at Dragon Rock RPG created called the Circle of the Occult, which is very based on like hags and witches and this very kind of like, toil and trouble cauldron-y type of subclass. She's tied to an entity and a hag coven. And so we meet what I had originally anticipated to really only be a harpy, right? But like a really, really like beefed up, like, boss type monster. And, but the way that I was running it is that she had already sensed that there was some connection, like harpies have some connection to the Feywild and to Fey magic, right? And so she's like, am I picking up a vibe, a very familiar vibe, which I knew meant, for her meant, am I getting like, this is a hag, right? Like, is this like, am I getting that, like that same kind of vibe that I got from somebody from the coven that I grew up in? And in my head, I went, well, it wasn't supposed to be, but now it is.
Yeah,
like
exactly.
because it was one of those things that was too good to be true. Because this, I was thinking, man, I'm like, how else would this super beefed up, powerful harpy, who is from Fey magic, not be somewhat connected to a, not necessarily had to be connected to a coven, but have as powerful magic or have as powerful of an aura about them as a hag, as who is a part of a coven. And so I was like, yeah, you're definitely picking up that vibe. And from there, I like immediately, I had the stat blocks that I had worked on up, and I pulled up a couple hag stat blocks as we were getting ready to go into combat with this thing. And I'm like, all right, start integrating, start homebrewing right then and there. And so I love any little bit that my players bring to the table that I can also kind of grab and incorporate into the story is very much the style that I enjoy DMing, because it's not just my story to tell, it's our story as a table to tell.
I agree. And I think that is one of the most important things about realizing that you're in a collaborative story, and just knowing that, you might have a really great idea for an adventure or for a campaign or whatever, but when you have, 5 heads around the table and everybody's sort of speculating about what happened, there's sometimes going to be ideas out there that make more sense than what you had originally thought of, or are just way cooler. And I love those moments when they come up, and I can, sometimes I'll still tweak what they said a little bit so that it fits closer to what I had planned. But I just love that aspect of, I had written this thing, but then they gave me this wonderful idea that's even better. So let's just go with that, because it's what they were dreading or looking forward to in the first place. And it just makes the story all of ours, just like you said.
Yeah, especially when you're feeding off the energy at the table, it's very contagious, because when they're excited about something, it makes you excited about something. And then when you're excited about something that they've now, or like when you brought something to fruition that they were already excited about, it's that like, hey, I'm giving you back that thing that you were so excited about. And it either terrifies them, like you said, or it's just that energy kind of vampirism back and forth that we naturally seek as DMs.
Vampirism, I like that. That's a good way of explaining it. So let me ask you this: when you do sit down and you actually do like a piece of writing, figuring out an adventure, how much actual writing work do you put into it? Like, do you just do bullet points, or are you more of like writing paragraph and writing dialogue? What's your style when it comes to actually putting words on paper to build your adventure?
It really depends. When I'm starting an adventure, the first couple of real big plot points, I tend to write out a little bit more in detail and go into that. Not necessarily dialogue, because I will, even if I write dialogue down, I will never look at it. I always have I want the conversation to happen naturally. I may have notes about what they may know, but it won't be like they're going to say this exact thing.
Right.
But no, in general, it's very much bullet points. I tend to outline a lot more, being, like I said, very based on improv and feeding off of, back and forth with the players. I tend to often under prepare more than I over prepare.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Sure. Yeah, that does make sense. And honestly, I think for myself, generally speaking, I'm more of a bullet point sort of writer as well. I think the exception for me is is like I think you mentioned as well, when you're first starting your first couple adventure points, I do tend to write a little bit heavier at the beginning because I think it does help me set a better foundation for what the adventure and what the world's going to be, what the players can expect to experience as they start in the world. And by the time I get through that bit of writing anyways, we're already off to the races for they're chasing after the things that they're really interested in. I've got a better idea of what their characters are. And then the improv part of it, I think, makes a lot more sense once you get past that.
Yeah. And when it's a very, the Ecriom expeditions is very much so an open world, player driven story. It obviously has elements that I as the DM have to throw in, because if I don't, then the story doesn't progress naturally. But it's finding ways to key off your player interests that continue the story that you want to tell as the DM, but also tells the story that your players want to tell about their characters and about their group as a whole. That I think is most important.
Awesome. Okay, well, let's go ahead and move on to tricks of the trade. So for today's tricks of the trade, I have asked Logan to come up with a few ideas for single session adventure ideas. I have a couple of my own as well. I'm going to go ahead and share one first, and then Logan can go. We just go back and forth while we have ideas. And so the first idea I have for a single session adventure would be tracking down the author of a mysterious note that makes its way to the party and promises a great reward to whoever can find out who the author is. So there can be little clues left in there that can lead them on sort of like a wild goose chase, or think of it more of like what's the word I'm looking for? The scavenger hunt type style. Just running around town. It could be a good way to get them familiar with the location that they're in, meeting a lot of NPCs and picking up on all these pieces until they finally find out who the author of this note was.
I like that too, because there's a way that you can build it where maybe the note itself isn't all in one piece. So you have that kind of, like you said, that scavenger hunt idea where like they first start here and then they got to go to the next place and they find another little bit that they can add on that brings them to the next and on and on. And I really, really like the one thing I really enjoyed about session 0 is talking about getting them super familiar with their that kind of starting location, that starting setting. And so bringing that in and kind of building upon it's really cool. Really awesome.
Thank you. Yeah, I think it's just fun. I think scavenger hunts are kind of unique, I think, to some, computer video games where you kind of do similar things like that, where you got to go talk to this person and then talk to this person. And it's a good way to learn what the world and the setting and controls are like in a computer game, but it makes sense that it's a good way to get familiar with a storytelling world as well.
Yeah. So the first one that I prepared, I didn't know when I wrote this how similar to what I was just saying in session 0, what you talk about in session 0 for like the start of your adventure, that this really is. But I wrote, it's called Misty Shift Managed. And it's this one shot where they aren't level 1 adventurers yet. They're still commoners. But they essentially have to do all of like the duties around town. So like all the problems that all the villagers are having around town. There's one where they have to go and get honey for the local meadery, because the dwarf who runs the meadery has to or is sick and can't really go out and do it. They have to find out who the individual who is stealing a bunch of pies is. And it's really cool because these are all like little, almost like vignette stories that they can tell, but very similarly kind of get to know people within the community. There's another, what do you call it? There's another one where they have to go and figure out why the sheep are missing, right? Their sheep going missing ends up leading to a bunch of wolf spiders. And then all kind of culminating to them really being like, hey, we are really good at this type of stuff. What happens if we want to like go out and adventure and do things and like be more than just like whatever our day-to-day job is, right? And so they end up getting kind of contracted at the very end, or at least being contracted at the very end by the what's his name, the mayor, like the alderman
Mhm.
of the town, which I always found was really fun. It's this nice little way to kind of build that community, not
Mm.
only in the place that where they were, like where the adventure was starting, but also amongst each other.
Yeah, I like that. I love anything that ties them to their starting location. It really gives them a foundation of a springboard, to move forward on. And I think having relationships like that, where they've built connections to NPCs and to your world, make it much easier in the future to motivate your players to go out on adventures or do things when you need them to pick up on your plot hooks. Sorry, my second one that I had would be having your players have their characters put on a one-act play when a performance troupe fails to appear for the town festival. So they have to come up around the table with an idea for a one-act play, use their skill checks in order to perform that play, performances, and all the other skills that they might be able to incorporate into it, and tie it into something that's going on in town, a local festival or something like that, so that they can have a theme that they might need to follow.
I like that. That's really cool. And like if the festival's already there, it already builds, like you said, it builds the foundation of like, this is the theme that your presentation kind of has to be about. That's really cool. My second one, it would be there's a ruined tower in the middle of the woods. And from that tower, the nature around it has been dying and decaying. Recently, the town that you live in has noticed that the trees that the lumberers the lumberers are bringing in are continuing to have this blight, but bringing insects that bring the blight now into the homes. And so the party would have to go into the forest, figure out what's going on with the tower, and then figure out how to stop it or how to, overcome it.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Okay, so thank you for joining me today. I really appreciate it. But I do want to ask you before we sign off how my listeners can connect with you directly, where they can follow your podcast and all of the projects that you've got going on. So if you could just share with them the best ways to do that.
Yeah, so you can follow us on the Red Hare Inn, generally all one thing, on Instagram, on Twitch, on anywhere that you get your normal podcast. So on Spotify or Apple Music is generally where I see the most downloads, but I use Anchor, so it goes everywhere. And then on YouTube as well. It is, we do mainly live streaming, or I mainly do live streaming. Ecriom is a live stream show that we then push into YouTube and podcasts. I do homebrew as well, kind of on my own, writing with the patrons that come on in and hang out and chat. So if you're ever interested in seeing any of that or contributing in that way, I'm always open to talking with people who are hanging out and vibing with me when I'm doing that. But yeah, other than that, all the socials, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, even though I don't really do anything there, you can find us at the Red Hare Inn.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much, everyone, for joining us. Cyclothids, if you like this episode, please check out the Red Hare Inn, the Ecriom Expeditions, Tales from the Red Hare Inn, the Red Hare Missive, and please subscribe to the podcast. Check out my book, Session Zero, the DMG to Writing a Great Campaign in Any System. It's available on Amazon, and there's a link in the show notes. And always feel free to send me an email if you have any suggestions, comments, or ideas for future shows. The address is all one word, dungeonsdragonspsychology@gmail.com. And until next time, we will see you next session.